Hey guys, and welcome back. This is tutorial number 5 in the RPG Maker Rmvxace series. Today we're going to be making a credit script as requested by Silver Slasher, I believe it was. Anyways, so what we need to do is we need to go through and we need to display a number of images before the title screen. These images can possibly have scrolling text on them to indicate who had done that, but we also want to have like a title for that. Now, the title and the person text could actually be perhaps maybe what you want is actually a different transition. And I didn't think of it beforehand, but there is a great little script that I wrote for RPG Maker VX, or I'm sorry, not VX, but actually XP. You can actually find it in my signature over on Creation Asylum, but the idea of that one was that you would display a picture and you would set where it came from, at what rate it came into the screen, etc. And then all you had to do is just specify the image name and it would display that, and all you had to do is make a quick modification to the scene title for that to happen, and then when you'd press a key it would jump to the title. Now the difference though between that and RPG Maker Rmvxace is Rmvxace also has the ability to play movies. So there are a couple of ways we could go about this, but what I'm thinking what we're going to do is we're going to start with just an image one, and then what we'll do is I'll show you how to play a movie later. I mean, to be honest, I haven't really looked into it yet, so I'm not even sure, but I can't imagine it's all too difficult. So let's go ahead and start out here. So first things first, what we need to do is we need to follow exactly what happens when the game starts. Okay? So the first thing to understand in scripting is that it's a top-down process. So if we go all the way up here to the top, you've got all of your modules, you've got all of these different classes that are created, and what happens is that it processes from the top all the way down to the bottom of this list, and everything that whichever is at the bottom is going to take precedence over what's above it. So again, in the instance where you've got scripts that are conflicting, sometimes reordering the scripts can actually resolve the conflict, because some are made with aliases so that they don't conflict and some aren't. The ones that can't alias should always be first, and then any ones that have aliases should always come after, because then they should be able to communicate and work with each other better. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the main process. So remember again that everything is just a class definition above this. In other words, nothing actually happens in the game until you hit main. That's why all your scripts have to be inserted above main but below all your default scripts, is because the main process is what is the game. And if you put anything after main, then it wouldn't actually create itself until after the game has already completed and closed. So that's exactly why you have to put things above main, and then of course below there means that all of those default classes are already defined. So that's the reasoning behind that. So let's take a look at main. So first we start off rgss main scene manager.run. Okay, so it's saying for run rgss main, which is basically it's a command for the interpreter. It's a command for the actual game engine. Otherwise you wouldn't actually be able to use it. So to be honest, you're probably not going to play with that ever, to be honest. But where you are going to play is inside of the scene manager. So scene manager.run. So let's go up and look at the scene manager. It's all the way at the top of your scripts. And the scene manager.run method, or in the case of a module, it's self.run. It says initialize the data manager, run, create and set up audio, and then scene equals first scene class.new. Now first scene class is actually a method, which here says if it's battle testing, then return scene battle, otherwise return scene title. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually grab that, and we're going to just modify this so that the first scene class is not scene title, but it's a different scene. Okay? So let's scroll on back down here, and we're going to go ahead and insert our new script here. We're going to go ahead and call this credit script. Alright, So we're going to paste this in up here, and all we need to do is we need to modify and update this method for first scene class. Okay, so all we're going to do is we're going to change this from scene title to something else. I'm going to call it scene credit. Alright, so scene credit is what it will return. However, scene credit doesn't exist. So let's create it. Scene credit less than scene base. Now remember, scene base being over here gives you your start, post start, update, pre-terminate, and terminate methods, which of course have all of the creation stuff. So creation and dispose items. So let's see, one of these had the execute transition on it. At least I could have swore they did. Now, anyways, so we'll come back down here and go to our credit script. Alright, so def start. This is where we set up all the this is where we set up all the first things that are required for your scene. Okay, and then we've got pre-terminate and terminate. Alright, let me just make sure I actually got those right. And it is pre_terminate. I couldn't remember. Alright, so now that we've got all of those, don't forget to call super on each one of these, because this is a base class. You need to call the super class version of that method, which is the scene base version of that method. That's what that means. Alright, so inside of the start method, let's go ahead and start defining what we need. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways to do this. Initially, and I want to kind of touch on this because I've only touched on viewports a little bit before, and viewports is basically kind of like a holding cell or container for pictures or even windows. So what you can do is when you define a picture, you can pass it in the .new method, you can pass it an initialize viewport. Now that viewport says, hey, for this item displayed inside of this box, essentially. And each of those boxes can be lined on top of each other. So say for example, in the default game, you've got your background, you've got your characters, and then you've got your menu UI. Each of these here could represent a different viewport. Now technically speaking, you can control all of that via a just setting a Z value for each of those sprites as they're created. It works that way, it's fine, but if you really want to make sure that everything is where they're supposed to be and that there's no overlap, you've got all of your background in the background, you've got all of your sprites in one, and all of your UI in another, then what you need to do is create viewports. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create one viewport for the background items, and then we're going to create a second viewport for the text. And then what I'll do is I can show you that when you move a viewport, it will move every single sprite within that viewport. So we can use that for animating in data onto the screen. So if you want to display multiple sets of data all at once, you can create a whole bunch of individual sprites and just have them adjust their X or Y, and then you use the viewport XY so that you don't have to set the X and Y for all of those individual sprites. So it kind of just cuts down on a lot of overhead if you want to. Alright, so let's go ahead, we're going to start, and we're going to say viewport 1, and you know, actually let's just call them viewport background. And that is going to be a new viewport, and then we want this viewport to be the size of our screen. So in RPG Maker Rmvxace, the default screen size, I believe, is at 544 something or other. Let's see, I know it'll be in the game map class because it needs to know it for the centering of the screen. And unfortunately, I don't know where it's at. Oh, okay, so here they're actually calling graphics.height and graphics.width. So that's actually kind of nice, because now you can just say, well, what is the width and what is the height, versus before you always had to do it manually. So let's see. We'll go graphics dot, and actually it needs to be dot width first. So let's just go ahead, we'll copy that. Dot width and height. And I believe that's all we need. You might need to define X and Y as well, but so let's just go ahead and set those at 0, 0. I'm pretty sure you do. Actually, we can find out. Just search viewport new and see if, well, none of them do. Interesting. Anyways, so let's go ahead. We'll try it with that, and we'll see if it likes it, and then we'll decide otherwise. Okay, so our next step is viewport foreground. And we're just going to do the same thing here. Alright, so let's go ahead now. We're going to take our viewport background.z and make sure it's equal to 0, which it should be already, but just in case. And then we're going to take our foreground and we're going to set its z equal to 100. Now what that means is that any sprite that I add to the scene, if I add it to foreground, then it'll always be above the background no matter what, even if I didn't individually identify the z value for that sprite. Now the z value, of course, is still going to affect the layering of the pictures within that viewport still, so you know, z is still important, but not as important when you're dealing with the viewport. So alright, let's see. So we've defined our viewports. You know, actually, let's make this into a method so we can keep things modularized. Let's see. Set up variables. Set up variables. Alright, so now we also need our picture list. Okay? So let's go ahead and say get picture list. Right? Now our picture list is going to be a list of all the different images that we need to display. Now you could do this in a couple of different ways. Generally speaking, the picture list is always going to be a static list. It's always going to be in this order type thing, right? So what we can do is we're just going to define picture list, and this is going to be equal to an array, and then what you'll do is you'll just put in the names of the picture files that need to be displayed. And so I'm just going to leave it empty right now, and so what you would do is you would just add in all the different pictures that you want to display into this. Okay, so that's the first part of it. Now we need a picture background, right? Or just picture, right? And that's going to be equal to sprite.new, and then we're going to pass it viewport background so that it's created in that viewport. Okay? Next, we are going to, you know, should we do like as one picture comes in, the other one is already prepared and ready? Or, I don't know, that might work. I was just thinking that maybe what we might want to do is actually push one off of the screen, and while that one is pushing off, the new one is coming in right next to it. But then you wouldn't be able to as easily define which direction things should flow and so on. So I'm thinking that will probably not be the case. But anyways, so what we'll do next then is to adjust, or I'm sorry, not adjust, but let's finish defining our other sprites that we need to have. We've got the title, and that is going to be sprite.new, and then we are going to say viewport foreground. Let's just copy that up here. And then we're going to do name, and that is also going to be the exact same here. Let's grab it. Alright, so now we've got all of those things defined. Now we need to define a couple other variables, such as which direction things are going. Which are we going? Are we moving the title? Are we moving the name, etc. Right? So the way I did this in the XP version of the script was to identify a separate variable for all these different things, and those were defined as part of a like a config file, which was basically just a big array with all of that data in it. Now, not to say that that doesn't work, but perhaps what we ought to do is just define what is a default and then allow you to override it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a module with that data in it. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and define a new module. We're going to call this CreditScript. Alright, and then inside of here we're going to go ahead and define a new method, and this method is going to return the well, let's see, do we want it to be a method or do we want it to be some sort of a variable? Let's do this as, well, it has to be a method if we want to have like a default value for it. So, well, yeah, anyways, let me just check my recorder and make sure it's still going here. Alright. Last time it kind of stopped on me in the middle of things, so I was kind of annoyed at it. Alright, so we've got our credit script here, self dot, and let's go ahead and call this transition info. Alright, and then what we'll do is we'll pass it a index. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're now going to define what this transition info is. Okay, so this could be for the background, so we'll go ahead and put back X and back Y. And let's see, should these be the start positions and then have the other one be the end positions? I think that's probably best. So what we'll do is we'll do start position. So we'll do back start X, and we'll just make sure that that is 0. And then we'll do start Y equals 0, and then we'll do back dot target X. And then this will be the location on the screen in which this will transition to. And let's go ahead and say 40x, and then I'm just pulling these numbers out of nowhere, so don't mind them. And then that will do 60y, and then now we need the, so these are just the default values again. So we can override these at the end of this, okay? So we've got our start X, our start Y, our target X, and target Y for the background. So now what we need is we need those same 4 variables for the title and for the name. Okay, so let's go ahead and do title, start X, and this one here we're going to put it as 640, so it's just barely, or let's see, again, let's see, graphics.width, was it? Alright, and then underscore sy equals, if you use a dot, it actually is trying to say the title is already an object, in which case it doesn't have a method of y, so you'll get an invalid or undefined method y for nil. So make sure you use underscores or some other character that is recognized as general text. So let's actually also put this just beyond graphics.height, right? And then we'll go ahead and set its X, title, target X equals, and then let's go ahead and do 300 and title ty equals 300 as well. Okay, and now we've got our last part, which was our name. And to make life a little bit simpler, I'm just going to copy this, I'm going to paste it, and then we're going to search. You do Control H, and we're going to do title underscore and replace it with name underscore, right? So we say find next, replace, 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 and we don't want to replace that one. We'll replace that one. Alright, so just like that, you've gone through and now renamed those items and have that. Now let's go ahead and set this to a different value, let's say 320. Why not, right? Okay, so now you can start doing your overrides. So we can say case index when 3, so this would be the fourth picture to display, then it will override and use a different setting as to how to transition those items. And then of course what you're going to do is just change and set these same variables down inside of that, and then when you return, you are going to return, and we're going to return all of these pieces of information. So let's go ahead and do this as a... Now you know what we probably should have done is actually made this a class, like a transition class, and then you can just say, you know, set all of these different variables for it, and then we just return the class, and then we can read from it. That's actually probably a better way to do it, and so I think I'm going to change that. So give me just a moment here. It looks like we're actually at about at our time for this anyways. So I'm going to pause here for a moment, and we'll be back. Thanks.